Hello and welcome to the Facts Over Fandom show. Happy Friday. Ah, Take a deep breath. You've made it. You've earned this weekend. I am so glad you're listening to us today. Hopefully, listen to us on Spotify. If not, watching us on YouTube, that'd be great as well. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon. Now, I've talked about Spotify is kind of our preferred home for the Facts Over Fandom show. And you can also watch us on YouTube and Rumble. We're also on Rumble if you want to check us out there. Anything helps, but Spotify helps us a little bit more as we look to possibly one day maybe monetize this show. And certainly the subscriptions and the likes on YouTube help. So do us a favor if you're a fan of this show and I see the numbers and people are listening, please do a couple things for us. Like the show. If you're listening to us on podcast, maybe Spotify or Apple, 5-star ratings, the only thing that help. And then if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. That would really help us out. But for me, as I've talked about, this is kind of a labor of love. And this is my hobby. I don't hunt. I like to fish. I like to camp, but I don't quilt. I don't do kind of maybe your normal hobby stuff, but I like to podcast and I like to talk about sports. So that's why we're here. And if you're listening to the Facts Over Fandom podcast, I hope you're coming because this is the podcast at the intersection of sport, business, and culture. And we're going to get a lot into the culture today, and I don't want to waste a whole lot of time. So I want to do one housekeeping thing, talk about one housekeeping thing, then we want to get into it. Last week I talked about that I was going to start doing 2 shows a week on Tuesday and Friday. Friday would be our normal show where I take a topic kind of in sport management and break it down. And then Tuesday would be our crazy Twitter Tuesday. I've decided to scrap that. Unfortunately, I got other things that take up my time and other things that are a little bit more important to me right now. I'm on summer break as a professor, and that's fantastic. You'd think I'd have more time, but I got a 3-year-old at home who needs constant attention. Who knows? As I'm looking over to my right, I'm on my home office right now. He could come down any minute from his nap. And it's just tough to put together 2 shows because I want to put together quality shows and trying to handle all the social media and everything that goes into that. So it's just more fun for me to hang out with him. But I do like doing this podcast at least once a week. So the format's basically going to stay the same. I'm going to do the show every Friday, but kind of what I envision as crazy Twitter Tuesday, I'm going to scrap that. I'm going to do something else. So I talked about in the last episode that this show is a place where you're going to find facts and we're going to get into data. I'm not here to give you my hot takes on things, but as I look at things going on in the media, or I'm kind of seeing maybe people's reactions to certain things, everybody has a voice and I'm no different, and I have opinions. I just happen to think as somebody who's actually worked in sport, been in locker rooms, I can bring a little bit more to the table than just maybe some average, maybe sports media personality, whoever they may be, who's never had that experience, who's never had to sit across the table from somebody and try to close a $50,000 sponsorship, or has ever had to bring a player into their office and talk about, why they shouldn't be doing some things that they've been doing, and having your livelihood depend on 18 to 22-year-olds. I don't know if they've ever had to discipline a coach or have ever had to go out and try to solicit donations. So I've had those experiences, and I think I come from a place of expertise. So what we're going to do, I'll have my normal topic that we're going to talk about every week, and I'm going to try to be a little bit more topical. And then at the end of the show, we're going to do a segment. I probably need to come up with a better name. I probably should have thought about that before I started. I turned on the microphone, but we'll call it Uncle Brandon Advice. So I'm going to kind of give some advice or maybe some perspective on what's going on in the news. And so with that, let's get into our topic today. Today, we're talking about ethics in sport. And I think this is a conversation that certainly needs to be had. Now, as I talk about this, my ethics, my morals are just that. They're mine. Your ethics, your morals are yours. And I'm not here to try to put force down my ethics or morals to you. Only you can decide what would be considered ethical or moral for you. However, there are probably a lot of things that we all agree on, regardless. Let's say if you're, Christian or Jewish or Republican or Democrat or, really, liberal, conservative, whatever it is. There's probably a lot that we can agree on as we talk about morals and ethics in sport, even if we have different perspectives or ways of seeing the world. And that's what I want to talk about, and hopefully kind of maybe get a discussion going on some of these things. Because if you think about what's going on in sport right now, and these are just some stories that have come out this week. I mean, we look at, there's a huge official shortage right now in youth sport, high school sport, from youth sport all the way up to high school sport. According to the National Federation of High Schools, we've lost about 50,000 officials since COVID, and the feedback they're getting, one of the biggest reasons on that is behavior by parents and by players, and just the constant abuse. I coach in a T-ball league, and they have a zero tolerance. Now, T-ball is part of like T-ball and coach pitch, and then player pitch and minors and majors. So we're part of a big little league umbrella. But they have zero tolerance, and they will kick you out of the complex if you give their officials a hard time. Because now, I mean, they can't get parents to volunteer or help, and they're paying high school kids to officiate and referee these games. And with that, it's good for them. It's cheap labor, and it gets the kids something to do, and it gets them a little bit of money. But being a high school student at one time, and being a high school student who officiated T-ball, who officiated soccer and basketball, there's also some negatives that go along with that. And sometimes having adults there as officials can help quell some of the more aggressive parents, and they've just got a little more wisdom in that. But we're seeing a huge shortage of that, and to the point where they're canceling games, and that's been really really unfortunate. Just this past week, if you think about what happened with the Las Vegas Aces and how they they rescinded, the WNBA rescinded their 2025 first round draft pick, and they suspended their head coach Becky Hammon for 2 games because of an investigation that found that the franchise, the Aces, they violated league rules regarding impermissible player benefits and workplace policies. One of the players saying that she was retaliated against when she was pregnant, and Becky Hammon was kind of targeted by this player in her allegation. And Becky Hammon has been somebody who's been talked about possibly as becoming an NBA head coach one day. Now, they dispute some of that, but that's what the WNBA came down, taking away draft pick and suspending their head coach for 2 games. And then we get to Ja Morant, which, if you've been on social media at all, if you follow any type of social media, especially sports social media, you've seen that he was caught flashing a gun in an Instagram live video. So my Uncle Brandon advice today is going to be for Ja Morant. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that in the second segment, the later segment of the show. But without any further ado, let's get into it. Let's talk about ethics in sport. And so I'm going to give you some definitions here. And these are things that I talk about in my class. I talk about with my students as I have this discussion with them. So let's talk about ethics, ethical reasoning, and an ethical dilemma, right? So ethics are just the systematic study of the values that guide our decision making, and they reflect how we believe people should behave and how we want the world to operate. And so again, we probably share similar ethics, and I'm not going to give away a whole lot about me, because I want to try to keep this as neutral as possible. But I would imagine there's a lot of people who don't worship like I worship with my religion, or who don't see the same thing politically the way that I see things. However, we have kind of an agreement. We're all, and I'm assuming if you're listening to this show, you're here in the United States. We're all Americans, and we all live under the same law. So I think we all probably have an agreement on how we believe people should behave and how we want the world to operate. If you think about in sport, most of us, we want sports to be fair. We don't want people to cheat, and we don't want to feel like we're involved in a rigged contest. Ethical reasoning, now this is the process of making a correct and fair decision. And again, it depends on our values or the values of who we work for, like, your business, your organization, or whatever it is. So, you've got your ethics, and then we want those to guide our reasoning on things. So if you look at a place, to go back to the WNBA example, they certainly don't want their athletes to be to feel like they're being retaliated against, or to be harassed in any way, or to have a hostile workplace. So if that's their ethics, then if things like that happen that are the antithesis of what they want, right? They have to act according to their ethical reasoning and make judgments because of that. Right? And then we get into ethical dilemma. And just the definition of this is just a practical conflict involving, I think, I don't know, sorry, I'm stopping, but if you're looking on the YouTube, yes, we've got a fly here in my home studio, the office, that's landed on my head, which is embarrassing. So if you see me swatting things, that's just what it is. And I'm sorry. If you're listening on the podcast, if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, and you hear me hitting the microphone, that's just me trying to swat this stupid fly. All right, so ethical dilemma is just a practical conflict involving equally compelling values or social obligations, and it's solved when we articulate which commonly held values we admire the most. So, an example I use in class was 9/11. And when do we get back to normal after 9/11? When can we laugh again? When can we watch sports? Can we go back to the movies? And if you remember in the World Series that year, President Bush at the time goes out in a Subway Series with the Mets and the Yankees, and President Bush goes out. Of course, this is 2001, and this is about about 6 weeks after the terrorist attack, and he throws a first pitch in one of the games of the World Series, and throws a strike right across the plate, right? And it's at Yankee Stadium, and the whole place just erupts. And it was this great unifying time. I know it's really, really difficult, 22 years later, just get on social media or just talk to people on the street. It's hard to bring that spirit back or to believe that it was there. But there was no Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal at the time. It was the whole country together. We had been attacked, and it happened, one of the places that happened in New York, and just the footage of the towers coming down was just absolutely heartbreaking. And so when do we get back to normal, though? When is it that time where we move forward in our country? We know we're going to be going to war. We've got over 3,000 dead. When does the healing start? And, the ethical dilemma there is, do we play sports? Do we go back to movies? Do we watch TV shows that are comedies? Is it appropriate to laugh? Is it appropriate to go back to what our life was pre 9/11 and kind of go back to normal, as I use in air quotes? And I think seeing the president come out and throw that strike in the World Series, our America's pastime in New York, I think that was a big step in helping us get back to normal and letting us know that, what, it's okay. What happened was awful, but it's time to move forward. And as your leader, I'm going to take that step for us. Right. So that was a really big moment if you're thinking about kind of an ethical dilemma right there. And then kind of going along, as I was talking about with ethical reasoning, there's ethical decision making. And this requires consideration of how actions are going to affect other groups and individuals. So not just you at this point, but other individuals. So ethical decision making. And again, I'm not going to tell you what your ethics should be here in this episode, but think about this question for a second. Is it ethical for a youth coach, and let's say these are, 9 or 10-year-olds, Is it ethical for a youth coach to play the bigger and stronger kids in order to win rather than the smaller kids who still need to develop? Now, I've talked about youth sport development just a couple episodes ago, and I tried to give a researched back explanation of youth sport development and how it's really important that you don't try to push competition too fast on kids, and kids develop at different rates, and just some of the dangers of a sport specialization that we see as well. So is it ethical for a youth coach to play the bigger and stronger kids in order to win rather than the smaller kids who need to develop? What's your ethics tell you? Should everybody get a chance to play? Um, should everybody, if that's the case, should they all play equal time? Or do we kind of allocate it a little bit? Hey, our better players going to play 60% of the time, and our not as good players are going to play 40% of the time? Or do we only play the best players in order to win? And hey, sorry, kid, that you're small, but you're just not good enough to play right now in this 10-year-old league, right? What do your ethics tell you in that? Right. And so you've got to, I'm going to kind of give you a breakdown or kind of some steps in the ethical decision-making process here in a second. There's kind of 11 steps that go into it. And in fact, let's go ahead and let's talk about that. Let's talk about the 11 steps in the ethical decision-making process as we think about this question. We're coaching 10-year-olds. Does everybody play, or are you only playing to win? Right. What's ethical? So step one would be identify and correct the problem to be solved. Right. So you've got some parents who are really upset with you. You're not playing the kids because you're only playing the bigger and the stronger kids. Because, for you as a coach, the most important thing is winning. And, if you're just not up to stuff right now as a 10-year-old, you're just not up to stuff. You're not going to play. Right. Step two, gather all the pertinent information, kind of hearing from all sides. Step three, explore, are there code of conducts in your league? And I would say that would kind of put an end to this pretty quick. I mean, just getting to step three, if the league tells you, hey, everybody needs to play and everybody gets equal playing time, then that's it. And if you got parents who are upset with you that, everybody's playing and the best kids aren't playing more than the kids who are still developing, it's an easy conversation for you to say, hey, I understand where you're coming from, and I know you want to win. However, this is what the league says we need to do, and this is what we're going to do going forward. Step four would be examine your own personal values and beliefs. Are you doing things that are against what you believe in, that in your heart? I mean, sometimes, and it sounds like a cheesy thing, but if it doesn't feel right in your gut, it's probably not right. Again, I'm trying not to bring in too much of my outlook on this, but as somebody who's a Christian, we talk about conscience a little bit, and as we talk about conscience, I think for a lot of Christians, at least for me, we're talking about that voice of God kind of inside your head that's trying to lead you and telling you what's right, what's wrong. And sometimes if it just doesn't feel right, something just feels off, it just doesn't feel right. Sometimes that could be a way of God telling you, yeah, you may want to rethink this, or let's maybe go down a different path. Step five, consult with your peers or other individuals in the industry who may have had similar situations, especially people you know and trust who have your best outlook at heart. Step six, list your options. Step seven, look for a win-win situation if all possible. I think about that Office episode where the win-win-win and Angela and Oscar fighting over the babies playing jazz poster. But how can we find a win-win? Is there a way where both sides can be happy? Step eight, and if not, we'll keep going. Step eight, ask yourself, how would my family feel if my decision and how I arrived at my decision appeared on the internet tomorrow? Or think about this. If you had to say something in front of your grandma, or if you had to say something, would you say it in front of your grandma? Right? If this decision was posted at your church, or if this was, posted it in front of your buddies, or posted in front of your families and everybody could see it, how would you feel? And especially how you arrived at that decision. Are you being influenced by outside sources, whether it be for a position or for money, for clout, whatever it is? Okay? Step nine, sleep on it. don't rush to a decision. I think that's great. All of our kind of initial knee-jerk reactions when it comes to some of these ethical decision-making processes, a lot of it is driven by emotion. It's not driven by facts. It's not driven by data. Sometimes you just need to let the emotion out, and then you're able to move forward. I mean, I had that in my own life, and I had that this week. I did not get like I said, I'm in the summer, and I've got a little bit of time where I can do some things, and I kind of get bored at home a little bit, and we've got some grandparent help to watch with my son here pretty soon. So I thought, I'll play for a little part-time job, and this particular job I didn't get. I don't necessarily know why, but I didn't get it, and my first reaction, it was emotional. It wasn't based on an objective analysis of the situation. It was emotional. I was upset at first, but as I kind of calmed down and thought about it and kind of relitigated it in my head, I knew I was maybe punching outside my weight class a little bit, and applying for something that I might not have had the actual background or experience needed for this particular job. And you never know what's going on in a job, in a job posting, or somebody filling a job. Sometimes there's things going on inside of an organization. I've been part of a lot of hiring committees as well that you have zero control over. You could be an outstanding qualified candidate, but there could be other forces that are going on that you can't overcome. Whether it's somebody who on the inside that they want to elevate into a position, if it's some type of influence from higher in the company, there's just things that you just can't overcome. So you just kind of have to remind yourself that, and that's what I had to do. And I slept on it last night. I woke up, feel great, no problem. Hey, move on, and away we go. Right. So usually that first reaction is emotional. Understand that, accept that, sleep on it, and then we move forward from there. Step 10, make your best decision, knowing it may not be perfect. Not everybody may be happy. You may have to upset some people. Oh my gosh, you can't do that. Right? Hey, not every decision you make is going to be perfect, but if you try to get as many facts as you can, try to look for that win-win decision, and you take your time and you're deliberate, at least you can feel a little bit better about it. And that goes to step 11, evaluate it. After you've made that decision, evaluate it. Was it good? Was it bad? Was there something we could have done a little bit better? If, going forward, if that happens again, how will we deal with it? Right? So a couple more definitions that I want to get into, and then I'm going to move forward with another example, and then we'll get to the highly anticipated Uncle Brandon advice for Ja Morant here. But two other definitions I wanted to talk about is morality and morals. Very similar, very similar words, but a little bit different in meaning. So morality are concerned with the values that guide your behavior. The list of those actions people ought to do or maybe refrain from doing. So if you think from like a Judeo-Christian example, the 10 Commandments, that's dealing with your morals, right? So those are the values that guide behavior. So, you've got a list of things that you're not going to do based on your morality because you do not believe it's right, right? Thou shalt not steal. Okay, I'm not going to do that because my morality says that is wrong. If I do that action, it's going to take me away from being the person that I'm that I'm supposed to be, right? It's going to take me farther away from that, or it's going to take me farther away from my relationship with God, or farther away from my relationship with friends or family or whatever it is, right? That's my morality. These are the lines in the sand that I am going to draw because if I go over them, they make me a far less better person than if I refrain from these acts. Hopefully that makes sense, right? And then your morals are just your fundamental baseline values. So they're similar, right? But they're the baseline values that dictate appropriate behavior within society. So morality is kind of a little bit more individual, but morals are values that dictate appropriate behavior within society. And again, there's different morals everywhere. I've had the good fortune, and I'm not going to count it right now, but to have visited about a dozen countries in my lifetime, both here in North America, Central America, in Europe. And we've got different morals and we got different outlooks when it comes to certain things. And you have to respect that to a certain degree, respect that people have different morals. Now, you may not necessarily agree with their morals as a society. There's things I've seen when I've been over at Europe where I certainly hope I wouldn't see it when I'm here in the United States, especially with some interesting ads on TV when the sun goes down, if you catch my drift. But again, those aren't my morals. Those are morals of another country that they feel are appropriate. So with that, let's talk about morality and corruption, because we see corruption happen in sport. I mean, if you think about FIFA, just the bids for FIFA and the IOC with how they get the Olympics and the World Cup, and Sepp Blatter, it's been well documented with allegations of corruption, where countries are paying him under the table to make sure they get that bid for the World Cup. And you think about the World Cup being in Qatar here this past year. Well, there's some human rights issues that people have brought up there with that country. Their facility, they didn't even have the facilities to host the World Cup, and they had to build them. And they certainly don't have the same laws and regulations like OSHA that we have here in the United States. In Qatar, and their estimates of over 1,000 people had died building these facilities for the World Cup. So unfortunately, we can't get corruption out of sport. We can try, and we do that by hiring and placing people in leadership positions with good morals. And so, immoral behavior, it violates our basic assumptions, and it corrupts our social institutions. An immoral decision, it can lead to systematic corruption. And, you as a sport enterprise, that can destroy you. And especially if it's coming from the top, it only takes one bad decision to just, destroy your entire organization. And it just takes like one bad person, especially from the top of your organization, to really kind of destroy things. If you think about a guy like Lance Armstrong, who I was a big fan of and had a ton of respect for, him getting busted with doping, really, cycling was already a sport where it was highly prevalent. However, you take it's wasn't really popular in America. And then you get a guy like Lance Armstrong, just helps the sport explode on the scene. He left a lot of hurt people along the way, a lot of unhappy people along the way, and really probably hurt the popularity of the sport, whatever it was gained through his 7 Tour de France wins here in the United States. And that was because he decided to do something cheating that we consider amoral here in the United States. And so corruption, it usually occurs when people hop from one set of moral precepts to the other. Like I said, for the most part, we kind of agree on morals here in the United States when it comes to sport. We don't want people who cheat. I mean, there's, you think about guys like Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, Sammy Sosa, Rafael Palmeiro. They're not getting into the Hall of Fame because they most likely use PEDs, right? And the voters will not vote them in. They cannot get enough votes to get into the Hall of Fame because we don't like cheaters. Now, again, I'm not sitting here behind the mic and telling you, yeah, they were cheaters and they deserve to be out, or, well, everybody was doing it, so they deserve to be in, right? That's not my point here. My point is we've got shared morals for the most part here in this country. One of them, we don't like cheaters, and we want the games to be fair. We don't want any outside influence of games. We don't want the league. It's always a big deal when there's like free throw disparities, right? In the NBA, especially in the playoffs. We don't want the league coming in and saying, hey, you better make sure this series with the Nuggets and the Lakers right now goes 7 games because we really want LeBron in that 7th game. And then we really want the Lakers to win because, we want the Lakers in the finals because it's LA and it's LeBron. So, you guys' rest, you call it, make sure Jokic, he gets 3 fouls on him in the first quarter, right? We don't like that because we want to assume that what we're watching is actually being fair and actually real competition, right? But when you hop from one precepts to another, so let's say, and I'm not saying this happened in the NBA, right? I'm not saying this would happen, but let's say you're the commissioner of the NBA, and your moral precepts, everything's going to be fair. It's going to be above the book. And then you're starting to see the ratings come in, and the ratings for these NBA playoffs actually have seen a bump. And you're like, oh man, if we can get the Eastern Conference Finals and the Western Conference Finals go 7 games for both of them, we're going to get so many more eyeballs. Ratings are going to be up. Money's going to be coming in. We can charge more for ads, possibly in the finals. It's more revenues for the team with merchandise and ticket sales for that particular team there. We really got to make sure these go 7 games, and we got to make sure LeBron gets into the finals, even though throughout the regular season, I want to play it fair. But right now, there's so much money to be made. I'm going to hop over these morals and worry more about the business side than I am the actual fair competition side. That's when corruption occurs. And it's usually not just one person, because if you were going to fix the NBA playoffs, you couldn't just do it by yourself. It would require a lot of, it would require a Herculean effort, or maybe not. Maybe it'd just be requiring paying off a couple refs. Again, I kind of alluded to it, I think, in our last episode with Tim Donaghy. And if you get an opportunity, check out that Netflix documentary with him. Talking, and he was the official, he was the referee of the NBA who was accused of fixing games and ended up going to prison, right? So a feature of this, when we're talking about corruption, is that it is systemic. And that's what I've just kind of alluded to. It's not just limited to one person, but you get somebody who's in high enough authority who starts jumping around different moral precepts. It's going to infiltrate the entire organization. So whatever your morals are, or I'm sorry, whatever your morality is, and then whatever your ethics are, you need to stick to them, right? Because if not, it's a very, very, very slippery slope. All right. And so you as a leader, if you're listening to this and you want to be a leader in sport, right? Something important is that your employees need to know that there's going to be consequences for moral behavior. And if people understand that corruption comes with certain risk, they're less likely to engage in those immoral acts. And so when you discipline employees, it has to be 2 things. It has to be meaningful, and it actually has to be enforceable. Right? So I'll go back to the Office. I love that show where Gabe is going to, or he suspends Jim and Pam and Dwight because they were making fun of Kevin and kind of in a way kind of making fun of Gabe or usurping his authority there. And so to show his authority, to show he's a manager, he's going to suspend all 3 of them. And Dwight was really kind of just caught crosshairs, but he's going to just suspend all 3 of them. And then it comes to find out, well, he actually doesn't have the power to suspend them or really do anything other than maybe just kind of scold them. But, it wasn't enforceable. And then Jim and Pam find out about it, and they basically just leave for the day and kind of take advantage of the fact that they were supposed to be suspended. And they go ahead and just leave work knowing that they're going to be okay and their job's going to be safe and that they're still going to get paid. So it wasn't enforceable. So if you're going to discipline people, one, it has to be meaningful. And again, I'm not here to tell you what it is that you should or should not do. But I'll go back to when I was a coach. I think the best motivator you have as a coach is the bench. Now, there's another side of that. Is it fair if you have a player who does something stupid? Is it fair for you to keep them out of a game? Because now it affects the whole team, especially if it's one of your better players. Ostensibly, it's going to make it harder to win for your team. And so, is that fair for everybody else? I don't know. That's up to you to decide. But it can also send a message as a coach that, if I'm willing to bench my best player because of they're breaking the rules, then the rest of you better fall in line, and that's gonna send a message. So again, that would be something that you'd have to figure out. And then it has to be enforceable. So you certainly wouldn't want to put a discipline, any type of discipline in that you can't actually enforce, because now it just puts you in a position of weakness, and it's just going to give people carte blanche to kind of do what it is that they want to do if they know, I mean, you could try to punish me, but you can't enforce anything, right? So discipline needs to be meaningful, needs to be enforceable. So that's our topic for this week. That's our conversation this week on ethics in sport. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for our next episode. Uncle Brandon's advice with Uncle Brandon. I don't know. I got to come up with a better name. I probably should have thought about that again before this episode started. But either way, next segment, I'm going to give Ja Morant a little bit of advice.
But let me hit you with some knowledge.
All right. So if you follow sports, then you've seen the video and listening to this podcast. I'm assuming you do follow sports, but you've probably seen the video of Ja Morant flashing a gun in an Instagram live video. Now, this has been talked about by talking heads and sports media ad nauseum at this point. So I guess I'm just going to lend my voice to that. But that's the point of this segment. This is my opportunity to kind of comment on things that I see going on. So the first part of the shows are going to be certainly a lot more kind of fact-based and taking a topic and drilling down a little bit more in a non-biased way. This is an opportunity for me to give some of my opinions on what's going on in sport. And this is some Uncle Brandon advice. We'll just call it Uncle Brandon. We'll call this segment Uncle Brandon advice. And this is some Uncle Brandon advice for Ja Morant. So this isn't the first time Ja Morant has gotten in trouble flashing a gun. I think he had a gun in a nightclub. It might have been a strip club. I can't remember who was flashing it. There was some allegations of, I don't know if maybe possibly him, but members of or friends of his, members of his crew, whatever it is that you want to call it, flashed and brandished a gun from to players on the Pacers team bus, I think, after a game. I think there's another incident with him and a gun, and there's a number of different ways to go about this. First, is there a problem with Ja Morant having a gun? And, legally, no. Flashing a gun in an Instagram live video, he did nothing illegal there. As far as the law goes, he didn't do anything wrong. Now, where I'm going to come and I'm going to give him some advice is from somebody who's a gun owner and has handled guns, and maybe in a different way than others in media might come from. I don't know if the NBA needs to suspend him or not. Again, he didn't do anything illegal, but he did do something stupid. And maybe not stupid in the way that the NBA realizes it, but stupid in kind of the message that he's sending in how you would want to handle an actual firearm. And as somebody who's, been around firearms and, own guns and still own a gun, brandishing it in videos, brandishing it in nightclubs, using it for lack of a better description as a prop is not how you handle a gun. It's not how you handle a firearm. Let me tell you something. If you've got a firearm in your house and certainly in your hand at the range, wherever it would be, this is one of the most serious pieces of equipment that you're ever going to handle. It's not a toy. It's not a prop. It's not something that you have out because you want to show people, or you want to show people that you're tough or anything like that. Um, it's a life-saving device, and that's the seriousness that you have to use, or the seriousness that you need to bring when you're talking about a gun. And gun owners will tell you, responsible gun owners will tell you, um, they don't want to take it out. I never, ever, ever, ever want to take my gun out. Never want to use it in a self defense situation. Um, I enjoy taking it to the range. I enjoy shooting, but I never. It's my last line of defense if it's my life, my family's life, or somebody else. And what gun owners will also tell you is that if you're taking it out, you're taking it out with the intention to use. If I have my gun on me, it's staying there. It's not coming out. I have no intention of taking it out unless I'm actually going to use it. The situation has gotten serious enough where it needs to be used. And if you would ever go to a gun range, there are so many rules that you need to know to protect you. Again, this is not a toy. So many people accidentally get shot by misusing a gun or not respecting a gun. And that includes kids who happen to stumble upon one and end up shooting themselves, or shooting somebody else. There's a responsibility as a gun owner to make sure that that gun is locked away and not accessible to other people. I know certainly mine is. There is no way my son could ever get to it, and he's almost 4. No way. And that's the seriousness that you have to take having a firearm. And I would assume that in certain circles, that if people know that you have one, kind of makes you a target. And you already are anyway. As an athlete who's making tens of millions of dollars, you're already kind of a target. And maybe you feel like you need to have that gun on you for protection. God bless you. I don't have a problem with that. I really don't. When you start kind of waving it around and showing it off, you're almost kind of inviting trouble to a certain extent. And that is certainly not anything that we would ever advocate when you're thinking about gun safety. So, some Uncle Brandon advice to Ja Morant: if you want to carry, please go get some training, respect the seriousness of that gun, and understand that the NBA has an image to uphold and they've got a brand to protect. And that brand does not include third players going out, showing off guns, and possibly using them. Because that's the other thing. You got to think about the people that you're around. And do they have your best interest at heart? I might have some disagreements with LeBron James, and I'm an MJ guy, but whatever disagreements I have about LeBron James, look at this guy. I mean, he never in the news for being in trouble. Now, he said some statements that I think are just ignorant, but hadn't been arrested. I think he's been with his wife for years now. I mean, you don't hear about him going and screwing around on his wife. Raises his kids like he's supposed to. And listen, I'm not giving him his flowers because hey, look, he's doing the right thing, and wow, isn't this amazing that he's doing that? No, that's the standard. Like, that's what you should be doing as a responsible man. But you look at a guy like LeBron, he could probably have any woman he wants. He could certainly hang out with anyone he wants. He could go anywhere he wants. There's nothing tethering him to staying at home and raising a family, other than the fact that, that's what a responsible man does. And so I got a lot of respect for someone like that, even if we might not see to eye on certain issues. Somebody who, as best as he can with his schedule, has the right people around him, is doing right by his wife, doing right by his kids, and works hard in his profession. Like, that's the guy you need to be like, Ja, right? Don't be like these dime a dozen guys who, just want to get clout on social media and doing things for likes, right? And if you want to go to strip clubs and you want to carry a gun and all that, I might not necessarily agree with the strip club part, but, it's your life, it's not mine. But just understand your perception. And sometimes, unfortunately, perception is reality. And now you're going to have to deal with the reality of the NBA coming down on you because you've tarnished their brand. We just talked about ethical dilemmas, and this is something that Adam Silver is in right now. Ja Morant did not do anything illegal. At the same time, I've got a business and I've got a league that I have to protect its reputation. That's my job as a commissioner. So what do we do here? And what's the message that these videos send out to our consumers? Right? Not an easy decision, but it's one that Adam Silver is going to have to make. I hope Ja Morant learns from this. I hope he grows from this. Amazing player. You've got an opportunity to be one of the best players in the league for a long time. You have the opportunity to be somebody that kids can look up to, like a LeBron James. Respect that seriousness, move forward, make good decisions. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Facts Over Fandom show. Make sure you check us out on social media, Twitter, Instagram, at FOF_show. Tell us what you like, what you didn't like about the show. Leave a comment, listen to us on Spotify, watch us on YouTube. And as I say every week, love God, love each other, be a good sport. We'll see you next Friday.